The crystal walls of the Sky Garden Pavilion glowed faintly pink as holographic cherry blossoms floated through the air. It was supposed to be a perfect day in Kyoto, the year 2074, the kind of wedding where every detail was engineered for beauty. My daughter Eiko stood at the altar, radiant in her gown of woven light, ready to begin her new life. And then, from 3 rows behind me, I heard it. "Poor boy. He's marrying a girl from the energy slums," Lady Sato whispered to her friend, her voice sharp enough to slice through the music. "She's nothing but a gold digger. My son deserves so much better." Her words weren't meant for me, but I caught them like shards of broken glass. She saw me turn my head and she smiled, a thin, poisonous smile that said, "I know you heard and I don't care." Most people would have swallowed the insult, waited for the ceremony to end, pretended nothing happened. But I've spent a lifetime listening to the wealthy mistake silence for weakness. They never see the trap being laid until the jaws close. I rose slowly, smoothing the deep indigo folds of my dress and walked toward the microphone at the front of the hall. Guests murmured, confused. The officiant hesitated. Even Eiko looked at me, eyes wide, her lips forming the silent word, "Mom." I smiled at her, then turned to face the room. My voice was calm, steady, carrying across the glass chamber with no need for amplification. "Marriage," I began, "is not charity. It is not a project. It is a bond between equals. And sometimes it is also the moment when truth finally takes its rightful place." What I said next would unravel Lady Sato's world, and no one in that room would ever forget it. 3 weeks before that microphone moment, I met the Satos for the very first time. The venue was the Kyoto International Energy Summit, a place where billion-yen deals were signed over cups of imported tea and polite lies. I arrived alone, stepping out of the maglev tram in my simple black coat. To most people there, I looked like a modest mid-level consultant. No entourage, no chauffeur, no jewelry flashing the family crest. I've learned to live quietly. The louder you boast, the easier it is for predators to spot your weaknesses. Lady Sato swept into the lobby 30 seconds later, dressed in a kimono spun from nano silk, embroidered with programmable blossoms that shifted colors as she moved. Her husband trailed behind her, smiling awkwardly, the way men do when they've spent a lifetime smoothing the sharp edges of someone else's pride. "Naomi Takahara," she said, her lips curving in a smile that never touched her eyes. "So you're Eiko's mother." Her gaze dropped, scanning me head to toe with the efficiency of a customs scanner. No designer tag, no diamond clasp, just cloth and calm. I bowed politely. "It's an honor, Lady Sato." The honor, clearly, was not mutual. She turned to her circle of investors and said loudly enough for me to hear, "Isn't it fascinating how love brings together people from very different circumstances?" Laughter rippled through her companions. Eiko, standing beside me, flushed crimson. She thought I didn't notice. She believed we'd lived on the edge of survival all these years. She never knew about the solar cities, the offshore batteries, the quiet empire I'd built after her father died. Lady Sato thought she was establishing dominance that day. What she didn't realize was simple. By underestimating me, she was riding her own downfall. Most people thought I was just a widow who taught night classes in environmental ethics. Even my daughter believed that her college tuition came from my second job, tutoring foreign students online. She never questioned why the bills were always paid on time, or why there was always a cushion in our account, no matter how lean things looked. The truth was, I owned more than anyone in that glittering summit hall suspected. 15 years ago, after my husband died in a factory explosion, I swore 2 things. First, that my daughter would never live in fear of survival again. And second, that I would never, ever let the powerful use money as a weapon against us. So while the Satos were flaunting designer silks and showing up in airships fueled by borrowed credit, I was building something invisible, an empire of solar fields, offshore energy vaults, and battery cities hidden behind shell companies. My partner, Kenji Mori, handled the public face. I stayed in the shadows. By 2074, our holdings were valued at nearly 18 billion yen. But no one knew, not my daughter, not the Satos, not even the politicians who smiled at me, thinking I was just another quiet woman from the lower tiers. I let them believe that. There's power in invisibility. When people underestimate you, they show their hand. That night after the summit dinner, I stood on my penthouse balcony overlooking Kyoto's neon skyline, the silent hum of solar drones filling the air. I held a glass of sake, smiled to myself, and whispered, "Lady Sato thinks she's playing chess. Poor woman, she doesn't realize I built the board." The next morning, I called Kenji. "Start digging into Sato Industries. I want to know exactly how fragile their world is." Kenji never disappointed me. By dawn, a file thicker than any novel sat on my encrypted tablet. Balance sheets, creditor reports, leaked memos. It was a feast of weakness disguised as confidence. Sato Industries, the great dynasty of Osaka, hollow to the core. 2 years of hemorrhaging cash from failed nuclear-to-solar conversions. 40% of their revenue artificially propped up by government favors and handshakes at golf clubs. And the worst part, 20 billion yen in outstanding debt, due in just under 60 days. Kenji's voice buzzed through the holo call. "Their creditors have been patient because of Lord Sato's connections, but patience has an expiration date. If they don't secure a miracle investment soon, it's over." I closed the file and let the silence stretch. My reflection in the glass wall looked calm, but inside I felt the familiar electricity of battle. This wasn't luck. This was alignment. Margaret Whitfield had once called it karma in another life. I called it justice delivered on schedule. "Buy it," I said simply. Kenji blinked. "All of it?" "Yes. Every note, every lien, every desperate extension they begged for. I want the Satos to wake up one morning and realize their empire belongs to the woman they mocked." The next 48 hours were a storm of legal signatures and wire transfers. By the time the ink dried, Naomi Takahara, the nobody in the cheap coat, held the keys to the Sato fortune. I slipped the documents into a slim leather folio, the kind that fits neatly into a wedding clutch. The irony amused me. The entire weight of their dynasty reduced to papers I could carry next to my lipstick. At the upcoming wedding, Lady Sato would smirk again. Let her. I already knew the words that would shatter her world forever. The boutique floated high above Kyoto Tower, a glass bubble filled with gowns spun from silk, nano fabric, even holographic lace that shimmered like starlight. The consultants greeted us with champagne and bows, their smiles programmed to make every bride feel like royalty. Except, of course, Lady Sato. She had already assumed the role of queen. "Eiko, dear," she cooed, plucking a modest gown from the rack. "This one is tasteful, simple, appropriate for your background." Her words were sweet poison. Eiko's smile faltered. I saw her fingers trace the cheap fabric, her dreams shrinking before my eyes. For years, she had sketched gowns in her notebooks, light, flowing creations fit for fairy tales, and now she was being told to settle. I remained seated, sipping champagne, watching the scene unfold like a director behind the camera. Then I stood. "No," I said softly. My hand brushed across a dress that seemed to glow from within, a couture masterpiece woven with diamond thread fibers, each stitch calibrated to catch the light. It was breathtaking and expensive, obscenely expensive. Lady Sato laughed, sharp and brittle. "Naomi, that gown costs more than most apartments in central Kyoto. Let's be realistic. "Let's see it on her," I replied, handing the gown to the consultant. When Aiko stepped out minutes later, the room stilled. She looked like the woman she was meant to be, radiant, unshakable, no longer anyone's charity case. Tears welled in her eyes. "The price won't be a problem," I said, sliding my platinum holo card across the counter. The consultant's scanner beeped. Approved. Instantly. Lady Sato froze, her painted smile cracking at the edges. For the first time, she realized the ground beneath her wasn't solid, and I wasn't finished yet. The Sky Garden Pavilion pulsed with music, its glass walls awash in shifting light from the city below. Guests sipped crystalline cocktails while drones hovered, capturing every smile for the family archives. It was meant to be a flawless union of two dynasties. And then Lady Sato couldn't resist. She leaned toward her circle of jeweled friends, her voice carrying just enough to slice through the air. "Such a shame," she said sweetly. "My son is generous to take in someone from nothing, a project bride, really." I set down my champagne. Enough. I walked to the microphone at the center of the hall. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the holographic cherry blossoms seemed to pause. Aiko stared at me confused, but I smiled, steady, calm. "Marriage," I began, my voice carrying clear as temple bells, "is not a rescue mission. It is not charity. It is a bond between equals, and today it is also a chance for truth." A hush settled. Lady Sato tilted her head, the faintest sneer tugging at her lips. "This morning," I continued, slipping the slim leather folio from my clutch, "I finalized an acquisition. As of 9:00 a.m., I hold controlling interest in every outstanding debt of Sato Industries." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The folio snapped open, contracts, seals, holographic notaries flickering to life. "So, Lady Sato," I said, turning to her pale face, "welcome to the family. From this day forward, you work for me." The silence was absolute. Then, like a wave, the whispers began: shock, disbelief, awe. Lady Sato's glass slipped from her hand, shattering across the marble floor. And in that moment, the dynasty that once sneered at my daughter crumbled before 200 witnesses. Game. Set. Match. The sound of Lady Sato's glass shattering still echoed when I closed the folio. Every guest in that glittering chamber was frozen, caught between fascination and horror. 200 pairs of eyes flicked from me to her, Kyoto's queen bee suddenly stripped bare. Lord Sato rose halfway from his chair, his face drained of color. "Naomi, surely there must be some misunderstanding." His voice trembled. "No misunderstanding," I said evenly. "I now hold every yen your empire owes, every monthly payment, every property lien, every shareholder vote, it all passes through me." Lady Sato's lips parted soundlessly, her painted face cracking under the weight of truth. I stepped closer, lowering my voice though the entire hall leaned in to catch every word. "But I am not here to destroy you, not yet. I am here for one thing only: respect." I turned, gesturing toward Aiko, radiant in her gown of diamond thread. "My daughter is not a charity project. She is not a burden. She is an equal partner to your son, and she will be treated as such. If you refuse—" I let the pause linger, like a blade hovering over silk. "Then I will exercise every legal right I now possess, and the Sato name will vanish from Kyoto faster than your glass hit the floor." The silence broke into gasps. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Some avoided Lady Sato's eyes altogether. Aiko's fingers tightened around her husband's hand, her eyes wide with something I hadn't seen before: pride. Lady Sato's shoulders slumped, but her pride wasn't gone. I could see it burning behind her eyes. She thought this was humiliation. What she didn't realize, this was her last chance, and I was the only one merciful enough to give it. Humiliation has a way of breeding desperation. Within days of the wedding, whispers began to circulate in Kyoto's upper circles. Lady Sato was calling in every favor, dialing old friends in Parliament, tea-house patrons, even gossip columnists. She painted me as a vulture, swooping in to ambush their family. She told anyone who would listen that I had manipulated her son, trapped Aiko into the marriage, and staged a hostile takeover of their company. The tabloids lapped it up. Headlines screamed, "Unknown widow destroys Osaka dynasty, and charity bride's mother wields iron fist." Exactly what Lady Sato wanted, mud on my name, questions in investors' minds. Kenji dropped the holo sheets on my desk with a grimace. "She's trying to burn your reputation before you can consolidate control." I poured tea calmly. "Good, at least she's finally fighting back. It means she understands what's at stake." "Naomi," he warned, "she's undermining client confidence if this continues." I cut him off with a smile. Already handled. Because while Lady Sato was playing with gossip, I was on calls with every major creditor, every institutional investor, every official who mattered. And unlike her, I had what they needed: liquidity, stability, and vision. They didn't care about tea-house whispers. They cared about balance sheets. By the end of the week, contracts were re-signed, this time with my company's seal. Clients sent congratulations. Politicians extended cautious invitations. And the tabloids, they shifted tone the moment my lawyers hinted at libel suits. Lady Sato had brought a paper fan to a gunfight. Elegant, yes, but useless. I leaned back in my chair, watching the neon lights of Kyoto flicker against the window. "Let her try," I murmured. "Every move she makes only shows me how far she's willing to bend before she breaks." Gossip wars were beneath me. Numbers never lie, but people can learn. That's why, instead of crushing Lady Sato outright, I handed her an assignment. "You will oversee the Shiga solar housing project," I told her across my office table, sliding a folder toward her. 500 units for displaced families. Tight budget. Impossible deadlines. No staff to hide behind. If you want to keep your place, prove you can deliver. Her eyes flashed with outrage. "Manual projects, that's work for engineers, not society women." "Correction," I said, my tone like ice. "It's work for leaders, unless, of course, you'd prefer unemployment." The next week, she arrived at the construction site in polished heels and designer gloves. Workers smirked, unimpressed. Mothers lined up with children, waiting for promises they'd heard 100 times before. I watched from a distance as Lady Sato gave a stiff speech about progress. No one clapped, but something shifted the second she followed a young boy into a half-finished unit. The roof still leaked. The walls were thin. Yet when the solar panels flickered on, bathing the room in golden light, the boy's face lit brighter than any chandelier she had ever bought. For the first time, Lady Sato's expression cracked. Her eyes glistened. She touched the wall, then looked at the boy's mother, a woman who bowed with tears streaming down her cheeks. That night, she stayed until the last worker left, shoes ruined, manicure chipped. Kenji found me watching from the shadows. "She's changing," he whispered. I shook my head. "Not yet, but for the first time in her life, she's beginning to see." The Shiga solar housing project opened on a crisp spring morning. Rows of new homes gleamed beneath the rising sun, each roof crowned with sleek solar tiles. Children ran barefoot across the courtyards, chasing the reflections of light dancing on the ground. It wasn't luxury, but it was safety, dignity, a chance to breathe again. I stood at the podium as the crowd gathered, families, workers, government officials, even the press. And of course, Lady Sato, standing rigid at the edge of the stage in a plain suit. The diamond pins were gone. Only shadows remained in her eyes. "Progress," I began, my voice amplified across the square, "is not measured in glass towers or banquet halls. True progress is when a mother knows her child can sleep under a safe roof. It is when light enters a home that once knew only darkness. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. I looked toward the row of children, faces glowing with awe. Dignity is not a gift from the rich to the poor, it is a right, and today we honor that right. I gestured toward Lady Sato. This project would not stand without her hands in the work. She learned, she fought, and she delivered. All eyes turned to her. She froze, her lips trembling, and then, for the first time in her life, perhaps, tears spilled freely down her face. Not the tears of defeat, but of something heavier, recognition. She bowed low, her voice cracking. "Forgive me. For so long I thought wealth defined worth. Today I was wrong." The crowd erupted into applause, some wept. And there, in front of hundreds, Lady Sato's carefully built mask dissolved. For once, she was human. Weeks after the Shiga project's ribbon cutting, life began to look different. Not just for the families who now had electricity and clean water, but for us, for my daughter, for me, even, unbelievably, for Lady Sato. Aiko invited her to our new Sunday dinners. At first, I expected the same icy glances, the same clipped remarks. But one evening, I walked into the kitchen and nearly dropped the tray in my hands. There she was, Lady Sato, wearing an apron, clumsily chopping vegetables. "Careful," I said before I could stop myself. She looked up, cheeks flushed. "I've never cooked before, but Aiko said it would mean something if I tried." It wasn't graceful. The carrots were uneven, the miso soup too salty. But when we all sat at the table together, Aiko laughed like she hadn't in months. Even her husband, Hiro, stared at his mother as if seeing a stranger, a softer stranger. Later that night, as we washed dishes side by side, Lady Sato's voice was low. "Naomi, I treated your daughter like she was beneath mine. Yet she is the one teaching me how to be family. For that, I owe her everything." I studied her face. For once, no performance, no mask, just tired honesty. "You don't owe her," I said. "You simply have to show up every day no matter what." She nodded, eyes shining, and for the first time I believed she just might. In that quiet kitchen with soap suds on our hands and Aiko humming in the background, I realized the war was ending. Not with surrender, but with understanding. Transformation is never proven in comfort, it's proven in fire. That's why, 2 months after the Shiga project, I called Lady Sato into my office. She walked in with steadier steps than before, no jeweled hairpins, no perfumed arrogance. Just a woman waiting to hear her fate. I slid a thick file across the glass desk. "The Morioka Initiative," I said. 1,000-unit smart city project on reclaimed land. Budget, massive. Opposition, guaranteed. It will take everything we've got to make it work. Her fingers trembled as she opened the dossier. "And you want me to?" "Lead it," I replied. "From planning to ribbon cutting, not as decoration, not as a figurehead, as the decision maker." She inhaled sharply. "Naomi, this is bigger than anything I've ever—" "Exactly," I interrupted. "If your change is real, this will prove it. If not, the cracks will show." For a moment, the old pride flickered in her eyes. Then she bowed, deeper than I'd ever seen her bow before. "Then let me try, and if I fail, the shame will be mine alone." Kenji caught me in the hall afterward. "Are you sure about this? Giving her the keys to a project worth billions?" I smiled faintly. "Growth doesn't happen in safety nets, Kenji. She either rises or she proves she never changed at all." That evening, I watched from my balcony as the neon skyline hummed with energy. Somewhere out there, Lady Sato was holding that file like it weighed 1,000 stones. And maybe, for once, she understood. True power wasn't inherited. It had to be earned. 6 months into the Morioka Initiative, the woman who once treated hard work like dirt under her nails was standing in a helmet and steel-toed boots, barking orders at contractors. And they listened. Not because of her name, but because she earned it. I visited the site unannounced one rainy afternoon. The reclaimed land stretched into a vast sea of scaffolding and neon-lit cranes. Lady Sato stood ankle-deep in mud, tablet in hand, arguing fiercely with an engineer about safety codes. "We don't cut costs on foundations," she snapped. "Not when families will live here. Redesign it. I'll sign the budget increase myself." The old Lady Sato would have pocketed the savings for another gala. This version, she was willing to fight investors to protect strangers she'd never meet. When she saw me, her eyes widened, then softened. She bowed, rain dripping from her helmet. "Naomi, I didn't expect. I came to see if you'd break," I said simply. She straightened, voice steady. "I did break. Back then, at the wedding, at Shiga, but maybe that's why I can stand here now." The project opened with no fanfare, no silk banners, just families moving into homes with lights that never flickered, streets that hummed with clean energy, and schools powered by the sun. The applause didn't come from politicians or investors. It came from children running barefoot, laughing as they turned on faucets that finally worked. For the first time, respect followed Lady Sato not because of her surname, but because of her choices. Standing beside her at the opening, I whispered, "This is the woman your son always hoped you could be." And for once, she didn't argue. The Morioka homes glowed like lanterns in the dusk, and for the first time in years, I felt the air around our families soften. The war was ending. One evening, Eiko hosted dinner at her apartment overlooking the Kamo River. No banquet hall, no hovering drones, just tatami mats, steaming hot pot, and the sound of laughter spilling from her kitchen. Hiro sat close to her, proud, relaxed, and beside them Lady Sato, yes, that Lady Sato was refilling everyone's tea with quiet grace. At one point, Eiko leaned into me and whispered, "Mom, she's trying, really trying." I nodded, because I'd seen it too. The softened voice, the genuine questions, the way she looked at my daughter not with disdain, but with something startlingly close to affection. After dinner, when the others cleared dishes, Lady Sato approached me privately. In her hands was a small wooden box, lacquered and worn by generations. She pressed it into mine. "This," she said softly, "belonged to my grandmother. A jade comb passed down through the Sato women for over a century. I always believed it should go only to those of pure Sato blood. But tonight," her eyes shone with something raw, "I believe it belongs to the strongest woman in this family. And that is not me, it's you." For a moment, silence wrapped around us like silk. I opened the box. Inside, the jade glimmered softly, carved into a phoenix rising. I closed it gently and met her gaze. "Strength isn't in keeping relics, Lady Sato. It's in learning to share them." She bowed deeply, lower than pride had ever let her before. And for the first time, I bowed back. The feud was finished. At last, we were family. 1 year later, the Sky Garden Pavilion looked different, not because of the architecture. It was the same glass walls, the same holographic blossoms drifting lazily through the air. No, what had changed were the people inside. This time, there was no sneer, no whisper of charity, only laughter, only family. Eiko cradled her newborn daughter, Hana, in her arms. Hiro hovered close, his hand never leaving hers. And across the room, Lady Sato, hair streaked with silver now, face softened by time and humility, rocked the baby gently, humming a lullaby I never thought she'd know how to sing. "Naomi," she said quietly when I approached. "Do you see her smile? She looks like Eiko did as a baby." I nodded, my throat tight, because it was true. And because this moment, this impossible, fragile moment, was proof that even the hardest stone can change shape under pressure. Later, as the family gathered for photographs, Lady Sato pressed my hand. "You broke me once," she whispered, "but you broke me into someone I could finally respect." I didn't reply. I just smiled and looked at Hana, her tiny fists grasping at the air as if trying to catch the light itself. In her eyes, there would be no memory of battles fought in banquet halls, no whispers of charity brides, no echoes of arrogance. She would grow up in a family forged not by wealth or pride, but by something far rarer, humility earned the hard way. I lifted my glass toward the skyline, the city glowing with energy from the projects we had built together. To family, I said softly, not the one you inherit, the one you fight to build. And for the first time, Lady Sato raised her glass beside mine.